Good morning and welcome to the 36th meeting of the Rural Affairs and Islands Committee in 2025. Before we begin, can we ensure everyone's turned their electronic devices to silent? Our first item on the agenda is consideration of the draft Common Organisation of the Markets in Agriculture Products, Fruit and Vegetable Miscellaneous Amendment Scotland Regulation 2026. Which I think wins the prize for the longest SSI title this session. And I welcome to the meeting Jim Fairley, the Minister for Agriculture and Connectivity, and his officials, George Burgess, the Director for Agriculture and Rural Economy, Debbie Kesel, the Policy Manager, and James Hamilton, Solicitor. And invite the Minister to make a short opening statement.
Good morning, Convener. Good morning, Committee. Thank you very much for the invitation to discuss this 2026 Fruit and Vegetable Amendment Regulation. This is a short SSI and it makes essential operational changes to how the Fruit and Veg Aid Scheme is delivered here in Scotland. The scheme is a legacy AU scheme which has been a success in Scotland. It relies on collaborative working, which, as anyone who's worked with farmers knows, is very difficult. It encourages innovation, sustainability and investment at scale that growers could not benefit from on an individual basis. Since leaving the EU, the scheme in Scotland has been funded by the Scottish Government. The purpose of the SSI is to ensure that the regulatory framework for the scheme remains effective and it is fit for purpose of the continuing to provide much valued support of our fruit and vegetable sector. It also provides the Scottish Government greater control over the scheme's budget. It does not seek to alter the purpose or principles of the scheme, which principally recognise the value of innovative collaboration between fruit and veg growers. The draft SSI proposes to make 3 changes to the scheme. The first will enable funding to be provided based on Scottish production. Now, while cross-border producer organisations have been supported under the scheme to date, now that there is no longer a UK-wide approach to the scheme, allowing for the funding of production outside Scotland is not sustainable nor appropriate going forward. With the equivalent scheme in England now having closed without any indication of what will replace it, it is important that we make this legislative change to ensure that Scotland's budget is safeguarded for the production here in Scotland. The second provides that operational programmes, which is a business plan necessary for the funding application, must now have a duration of 3 years. The SSI proposes that operational programmes remove the option of a 2-year programme and instead it must have a duration of 3 years. It also proposes that operational programmes may only be submitted in every 3rd year. This change would give the sector increased predictability for planning and investment, whilst enabling the Scottish Government greater ability to plan the budget. And the third introduces a legal right to appeal decisions. As it stands, there is no easy mechanism for a producer organisation to have decisions made by Scottish ministers in relation to the scheme reviewed. Instead, the only route available is to raise legal proceedings through a judicial review, which is expensive and time-consuming for all parties involved. The proposed SSI provides producer organisations who are part of the scheme with access to a statutory review and an appeals process. In addition to these 3 key changes to the scheme, the SSI includes a transitional provision which aims to assure that long-established Scottish producer organisations will not be significantly impacted for the 2026 to 2028 operational programmes. This gives them time to adjust to the proposed changes for a future round of funding. There was a 12-week consultation on the proposed amendments which was carried out over the summer. We also engaged directly with stakeholders, including producer organisations and industry representatives. The majority of stakeholders strongly supported the continuation of the scheme in Scotland. The National Farmers Union of Scotland said the importance of the scheme cannot be underestimated as a tool to enable economic empowerment for growers and market access. And Scottish Agriculture Organisation Society said the scheme has been highly effective in growers planning and crystallising balanced investment priorities for the benefit of growers, rural communities and the sustainable production in Scotland. Stakeholders also emphasised the importance of stability and clear guidance. This draft SSI responds directly to that feedback. Some responses to the consultation indicated there should be support for smaller growers who do not meet the criteria to access funding through the Fruit and Veg Aid Scheme. But this scheme is explicitly designed to support groups of growers that are legally recognised as producer organisations. It does not fund individual growers. Scottish ministers do not have the legislative powers to amend the criteria set out to be recognised as a producer organisation. Therefore, this was not a consideration in the proposed SSI. As I've said, this SSI gives the Scottish Government means to better manage the budget for the scheme. It ensures support can be focused on Scottish growers. If the SSI is not passed, there is a considerable risk that a significant portion of the budget would benefit growers from outside of Scotland who may be able to access other forms of support in their nations. There is also the risk that the budget for this scheme becomes so large that we must then reduce the support for other agricultural schemes. Therefore, the proposed changes are necessary to manage our budget and agricultural support in Scotland. I hope you agree the proposed operational amendments will contribute to the sustainability of the scheme in Scotland and the continued support of production in Scotland, and I'm happy to take any questions from the committee.
Thank you, Minister. I'll just kick off. You talk about NFUS suggesting that it was the importance of the scheme. My kind of argument in reading from the other stakeholders' feedback is not necessarily the importance of the scheme, it's the importance of the funding. And you talk about the risk. Now, we've heard this before, Minister, when you've talked about if we don't pass this SSI, there's a risk, there's a cliff edge. But again, there's been almost a decade to move away from legacy CAP schemes into something which better reflects the current horticultural needs in Scotland. Some stakeholders are concerned that it is limited only to recognised producer organisations. There's an inability to fund new entrants. So there are a lot of issues over this about how it's just a continuation of the same old and doesn't actually look to provide funding to a broader, more inclusive funding model, which would be more suited to what we see the industry at the moment. So how do you respond that this is just more of the same and actually not addressing where we are now in Scotland when it comes to growers?
Well, it is a continuation of a legacy scheme. There's no doubt about that, but it's a legacy scheme that works, and it works for producer organisations here in Scotland. I think there's some confusion about what the purpose of this scheme actually does. It's to allow smaller producers to get together and become a producer organisation. That allows them to get access to funding which would make their viability better. It allows them to take environmental benefits. So we've got producers who, as a result of being in a PO, have gone from using peat to using coir. So there are things that producers can do as part of a scheme that they would not be able to do individually. The purpose of this SSI is to protect that funding here in Scotland, because we have the potential for producer organisation members in English schemes to now join Scottish schemes and therefore start to erode that budget. So the purpose of this right now is to protect the budget and the integrity of that scheme for Scottish growers only. And I make no apology for that. We're trying to protect this for Scottish growers only. In terms of how we get funding to other smaller producers in other ways, we are actively looking right now at how we can support smaller producers in the other parts of our bill. This is specifically about this SSI and the continuation of this scheme, which is vitally important. And I know I've been out and met members of the producer organisations, and all of the early conversations that I had with them was to emphasise how important this scheme is to their ability to keep on adapting and developing it. They live in an incredibly competitive marketplace, so they've got to have all the tools available to them to allow them to be as competitive as they possibly can, while at the same time looking at how they're going to reduce emissions and be more environmentally friendly. It's a really good scheme. It works for our producers, and that's why we should really want to protect it.
Am I right in saying there's only 3 POs currently in Scotland, which would suggest that it does exclude a large part of the industry?
There are 3 POs, but I'm not quite sure what the overall membership of that, but what they do is they produce a significant amount of fruit and veg produced here in Scotland, and they give that protection and that security for that production here in Scotland. But as I said during my opening remarks, I'm very, very alive to the fact that we need to find better ways of supporting smaller producers, but that will be done in different ways through different parts of the Act that we currently have in place. And this SSI is about protecting the producer organisations that are currently there, so that we can give them the security while we look at other issues.
Okay, Ariane Burgess. Thanks,
Convener. Just picking up on the Convener's question around the 3 POs, I'd be interested to understand how long those producer organisations, so they've got existing contracts, how long are those contracts for? When do they expire?
I think they run until 28, but Debbie, I'll let you answer the technical side of those details.
The operational programmes that the three are on all end at the end of this year, and so then there would be another 3 years beginning in 26.
If we pass this
Yes.
SSI? Okay.
It would be regardless if they applied for it, that would happen. It's just that without this SSI, we could continuously have producers from outside of Scotland and be unable to sort of cap the budget for it. So yes, so they're on a current operational programme for until the end of this year.
So the pressure isn't that these POs will run out of a contract and run out of funding. The pressure is that there's an idea that growers out with Scotland can access the scheme.
Yes.
So could you explain to the committee how we think that they can access the scheme?
Do you want to?
Yep. So it's always been the way that producers from anywhere in the UK could access the scheme. And what happened was that there would be some Scottish producers in other producer organisations from other nations. Now, with the scheme closing in England, there would be an interest in those producers from those other areas who don't have the scheme anymore to come to Scotland.
Perhaps just one supplement to that. As Debbie's explained, the producer organisations can have producers from different parts of the UK. The responsibility for funding has lain with wherever the producer organisation itself is essentially headquartered. Right. So there are examples of Scottish headquartered producer organisations that are producers in England and vice versa. So that what we're trying to deal with is the situation where there are Scottish POs, so we would be responsible for funding, but that have members Firth of Scotland.
So is it the case that in the 3 POs right now we've got producers that produce based in England as part of those POs?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I'm trying to kind of understand, right, we've got this pressure to create this SSI, and it seems to me that it is about preventing producers in England, but they're already part of POs, so that will happen anyway.
We're protecting the budget, we're protecting Scottish production, we're making sure that other producers do not join Scottish POs and then add and inflate the potential budget that we would then have to pay out.
Well, I understand that's what we're trying to do, but I think I'm a bit confused about, well, if there's already English producers within the existing POs, we're already giving, George.
To clarify, one of the aspects of this instrument is that the support that is given depends on the value of their production. So in future, the value of production that is taken into account will only be the production that's in Scotland. So we're not casting out any English producers from Scottish producer organisations, but when it comes to the funding, we will only take account of the production in Scotland for how much the PO is able to claim.
Okay. So if we're doing that, then why is there a problem then if we're only taking into account the Scottish part production?
Without this SSI, that wouldn't be the position.
Okay.
So we need this to make sure that it's only based on production in Scotland.
Okay, thanks for that. So just in terms of the producers that are involved in the POs, I mean, I think some of the issues, that the wider context, and you did address that in your opening statement, Minister, is that there's different modes of producing fruit and veg and direct-to-market sales and market gardeners who aren't able to be involved in these POs. And I think that's the big concern, is that we've got many more people involved in producing food and a lot more people wanting, through the Good Food Nation initiatives, people wanting more locally produced food. So they have a sense that they're being shut out of this opportunity, and I think that's something we need to get clear on. I think what we need is, I think that what they are calling for is some kind of meaningful support for fruit and veg producers and it really needs to be along the lines of what we've got for lamb and beef producers.
Okay, so the small producers can join POs. so that they have the ability to join POs. We've also got the, what's the other scheme that we currently have running at the moment? Yeah, we've got the Small Producers Pilot Fund just now, but that is a pilot fund. And as I said during my opening response to the convener, we're actively looking at right now how we build resilience into that small-scale producer group of people who currently aren't in POs. I'm very alive to the fact that we want to build that resilience right across the country for a number of reasons. They'll put local resilience into local food areas. They will help with biodiversity. They will help the local economy. I'm very alive to all of that, and I am actively looking right now at how we do more in that space. This SSI is about protecting something that currently works very well and allowing that cooperation, because, as I was maybe being facetious in my opening remarks, getting farmers to cooperate is really difficult. It's really hard. So this scheme has actually been really successful at getting farmers to work together, sit around the room and say, how do we overcome some of the problems that we've got? And as a collective, how do we take bigger decisions? So that's why this scheme has been so successful. It's why we want to protect it. But that doesn't mean that we're not going to be looking at how we are going to do far more to put that much broader resilience into that small-scale production right across the country.
Frequently, when I've talked to also the Cabinet Secretary around the small-scale fruit and veg, the Small Producers Fund, Pilot Fund gets brought up. And when I talk to small-scale producers, they say that's not working for them. It's doing things like setting up a website and so on and so forth. So they, if that's the route we're going on, I don't think people are going to be happy. But I'm also interested to understand a little bit like the scale of, can we get a sense of who is in that? Like, what's the scale of producer that's in a PO? And then also, I'd be also interested as to why. I hear you're saying that the PO for this producer organisation funding works very well in Scotland, but otherwise UK-wide, they're moving away from this particular form of funding.
Oh, well, that's for them to answer why they moved away from it. I have absolutely no idea why they took that decision. This is another Brexit bonus that we currently have. This used to be funded through the EU. When we came out of the EU, it was stopped, and now DEFRA have, for some unfathomable reason to me, decided this is no longer a system that works in helping us to fund the people that are producing the very kind of things that I think we should be doing more of. So that's a question for them to answer, not me. In terms of the pilot fund that is currently running, yes, we do cite it, but it is a pilot fund. So if that's not giving us the answers that we're looking for in terms of how we build that resilience across the country, then let's continue to look at what would work. And I'm absolutely open to doing all of that, because I'm as keen as you are to make sure that we've got that resilience in our small producers right across the country.
Okay, so just on the pilot fund, I feel like I've been talking about that for years, and it's been dragging on for years, and the money's not come, and it's not an appropriate fund. That's what I'm hearing from small-scale producers. But I also would like to understand who are in producer organisations, what kind of scale.
Okay, in terms of who's in the producer organisations, I'll answer that. But I'm going to let George talk very briefly about the pilot fund. There are a range of different sizes of businesses within the POs. I remember one of the meetings where I sat in with them. You've got some of the biggest fruit producers in the country sitting beside people who have got a very small scale operation, and the only way that they could get the development and the growth of their business was being part of that producer organisation.
But small scale, I mean, what is that? Because sometimes people talk about small scale and it's 70 hectares.
How many acres of berries they were growing, I have no idea.
Okay.
But what I can tell you is their definition to me was, I am far too wee as a small producer to be able to do the things that I can do as part of this PO group. It is the best thing that has ever happened. It has saved my business. I am paraphrasing, but it was very much along those lines, which is one of the things that gave me the confidence that what we're doing is absolutely the right thing to do to protect this fund, so that those smaller scale producers can tap into that. The big guys really know their stuff. They know how to get things done. They know how to move with the market. They can see market trends. And if you're a smaller producer, you very often get left behind. So therefore, if they can get access to that thinking, then that helps to protect them. But in terms of what the numbers are, I have no idea. I don't know what the answer to that would be. But in terms of the Small Producer Fund, George will give you some technical answers on that.
The aspect of the Small Producer Pilot Fund that we're thinking about and the Minister referred to is the part that launched just last week. So the capital fund administered by Highlands and Islands Enterprise and South of Scotland Enterprise, but covering the whole of Scotland. So until now, that funding hasn't been available directly to small-scale horticulture. It is now, and they have the opportunity now. The other aspects that the member mentioned, and also under the Small Producers Pilot Fund, we've been funding things like the private kill coordinators in abattoirs, helping a different set of small producers, but again, the benefit of coordinated effort there. So the bit of the Small Producer Pilot Fund that's most relevant to this is the bit that has just launched the capital funding.
That's great news about the capital fund. How much is it?
There's about 500,000.
£500,000. Okay. I've got just a question around on the SSI around kind of timing and access. And so one of the things that we've heard from stakeholders is that they're concerned that if we pass this SSI, it could prevent new producer organisation from applying until 2030 and effectively freezing access during a period when we really need to be expanding domestic fruit and veg production. I'd be interested to hear assurances that you could give small producers that this SSI will not entrench exclusion or delay meaningful support while a future redesign is considered.
Debbie, do you want to pick that up?
It does close the application window to every 3 years, so it would be the next window would start in 2029, and it does that so that we can plan better and adjust budgets and things like that for it, and everybody would be on the same have the same conditions. But as mentioned, that's just for the fruit and veg aid scheme, and if we are going to consider other methods of support, that shouldn't be impacting that window is as it is.
Okay, but that's still so that means that from now until 2029, only the existing 3 producer organisations have access to that fund.
Yes.
So no one else can get into it until 2029.
Yes.
Okay, and how much is the fund?
To date, it's been around 3 million.
3 million, and we've got a £500,000 capital fund for other producers. So it's a pilot capital fund. What does that mean? It means that
so the complexity of finding solutions to all of the issues that you're raising, and I get every single one of them, I understand them, but one of the points that George has just made there just now about getting that coordination for private kill, that was one of the biggest issues that I heard about time and time again. From my time as a farmer right up until now, how do we make sure we get access to private kill? That has been one of the biggest issues, and there's been focus on doing that, so part of the funding has gone to making sure that coordination and everything is going on. There are a range of different demands and things that people want to see done in different areas, and it very much depends on where you are. If you're in Shetland, you'll have a different request to the problems that you're going to face in the borders, and vice versa. So we are currently working our way through how we're changing the support in agriculture, and as I said in my opening statement, I am actively looking at how we put much more resilience into small producers, and we have a pilot fund running right now at £500,000. Once we have got some clearer thinking on how we can do more, then I would be very mindful that that would be the kind of direction that we want to go to make sure that we are putting support in place for small producers.
So I just want to come back to this SSI, which is about fruit and veg. And so we're talking about fruit, we're talking about small producers, and suddenly we're talking about private kill, which is absolutely fine. But there's a concern there around the fruit and veg. I think it's the
talk about
it's the fruit and veg
producers
that we really. I think those are the stakeholders that have got in touch with us and said they are really concerned about being shut out from £3 million funding pot.
They're shut out of the POs, but that doesn't mean to say that there won't be other thinking about how we will help people, which is what I've been saying right from the start.
Yeah.
I am actively looking at how we can help to support small-scale producers right across the country.
So I think this is an example of the challenge that we face as a committee and perhaps as a directorate in terms of the kind of roll out the rural support plan and the fact that we get things in, we're getting drip-fed things, and stakeholders see something like this and they go, oh, but what about us? We're missing. So we're not seeing that whole picture, and that's something that we talked about the last time you brought an SSI before the committee. It's like we can't see the whole picture, so it's hard to have that conversation and reassure
I'm not disputing that. I understand that when you see things getting delivered in bite-sized chunks, that people will get frustrated because they think, well, where's my bit? How do I get involved in that? The alternative is that we do what they did down south and say, there's your policy, get on with it, and it's an absolute disaster. This is what co-production looks like. It's frustratingly slow for some people. It's not going far enough for one group of people. It's going too far for another group of people. So therefore, we're bringing this to you to protect this particular fund because we know this works. But I reiterate again, I'm actively looking at how we can support small producers as we go through this process.
So there's something I will, this is my final point, Convener, something I will say again, which I think I said the last time, was it seems to me there's something missing around communication with the broader, and I know that's challenging, you've identified there's a lot of different interests across the country and then also the sectors within the farming sector. But there is something missing around communication in general because we have farmers and crofters who depend on that certainty, depend on that long-term being able to project into the future, that planning, you know it all too well, you've been in the sector, and they want that certainty, need that certainty, especially when we're in the face of all this challenging, flooding, droughting, kind of weather uncertainty patterns as well. So I do think there's something about communication as you roll this out, and if it is going to be drip-fed, there's something that needs to be said, like, we're going to bring this forward, but we are doing these things as well.
Well, in terms of certainty, I think the most important certainty that we gave was that we were given a commitment that we were going to continue with direct support, because our farmers know that they've got that continuation of that direct support, which is not the case in other parts of the UK. And yeah, I get that this is tricky. I get that people get a bit frustrated. But we're doing this in a manner which is allowing people to move with us. They know that they've got certainty of funding. We're looking at other ways of how we can support small producers. But this SSI protects a particular scheme that works, and we want to make sure that it continues to work for producers in Scotland.
Rhoda Grant.
I think the problem is it doesn't work. We've had correspondence from people who feel that they're locked out. So it's excellent for some producers who are part of the producer organisations, but not for those who don't meet the criteria and aren't benefiting. So we've got a section of the industry who are getting funded very nicely and a section of the industry that are getting zilch. And they were expecting something different from this. They were expecting a new scheme that was more inclusive. And they understood that you'd consulted on that. And yet we've got the can being kicked down the road and nothing much changing.
We consulted on this instrument. We didn't consult on the entire picture of whether or not small producers were a part of this scheme. This scheme is about protecting a scheme that does work, and I'll push back on that. It does work. I know that it works. I've been out, I've spoken to people, I've seen the work that they're carrying out. And I've also stated that there are smaller producers who can get into these POs just the same as the big producers get into these POs. It's certainly working and putting resilience in our fruit and veg sector. And I will reiterate yet again, we are actively looking at how we can help support smaller producers in other ways. But this SSI is about protecting a scheme and a budget that is currently under threat if we don't pass this SSI, because it will be used by other people from other parts of the UK to be able to get access to funding. So we're talking about two different things here.
I can understand that, but it just seems to me like with everything else we're seeing within support for farming is that you're kicking the can down the road, nothing is changing, and everyone's thinking, where's the policy, where's the direction? Okay. And those that are being locked out are absolutely frustrated by it.
I sat here 2 weeks ago to bring an SSI and had the NFU pushing back saying you're going far too fast, you're going far too strong, stop, slow down. And yet I've got people telling me, oh, you're not going nearly fast enough. We're doing this in a way which is measured, is controlled, we're allowing people the time and the space to understand what's coming down the road. This SSI is about protecting a scheme that we know that works. If we get this SSI passed, we can park that and then focus on the other things that we've got to deal with. So I completely disagree with the points that you're making. If there is frustration, then I understand that people want to see more support going in different areas, and we're actively looking at that. But this SSI is protecting a scheme, as far as I'm concerned, is working.
But a scheme that's not equitable for all producers.
Sorry, Josh, what were you going to say?
Just to address that point about producers being locked out, I mean, the criteria for being a producer organisation have been in place for many years. They're not particularly onerous, so they require there to be 5 independent producers in the organisation. It requires a turnover of at least 1 million, which in fruit and veg is not particularly high. So there is not a huge barrier to entry. So at the moment, producers can decide if they want to join or form a producer organisation, and then they have the access to the scheme. So I don't think that there is any organisation that has been locked out of producer organisation membership or through that access to the scheme. Now, being a part of a PO is not for everyone, because it does require them to work collaboratively. It does require them to pool sort of marketing and distribution of produce. So there will be producers that want to do their own thing in their own way, rather than be part of a larger organisation. But the whole purpose of this scheme and the benefits that the Minister has outlined are about what happens when organisations work together, they collaborate and get the benefits for all of their members.
It feels like money follows money, frankly, and the small producers just are left picking up crumbs. But I understand that this has to happen, otherwise we're going to be funding large producers elsewhere.
Well, I disagree with the point that you're making, but we'll just have to agree to disagree.
Just very briefly, I think you mentioned at the beginning, Minister, that the definitions around, or the power to change definitions of growers' organisations, it might be, did you say it was a reserve matter or was it under UK law? Given the restrictions that are now being placed through this SSI on the schemes concerned, does that still make any kind of sense?
Insofar as protecting a scheme...
No, does the fact that this is a matter that's out with your control, as it were, does that reservation make any kind of sense?
Well, no, the reservation makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. It used to be that this was a devolved function, but I think it was 2020 that the UK government decided to make it a reserved function, which makes no sense at all because the budget comes from Scotland. But that's when we had PO schemes right across the UK. But the fact that England have now stopped doing theirs has put us in this position where, in order to protect it, but we don't have the primary legislation in order to change any of the definitions within the scheme. But as it stands, it's doing what it was required to do in the first place. It just means that we would have to, well, we don't have the powers to be able to do anything within the definitions of the scheme as it currently stands. So no, I agree with you. It doesn't make any sense at all that function is reserved, but everything else is devolved.
Okay, thank you.
Does that stop the Scottish Government putting in place their own new scheme?
There's nothing to stop us doing something going forward, but right now we're keeping this scheme in place in order to protect the sector members that we currently have.
Emma Harper.
Thanks, Convener. Good morning, Minister, and good morning to your officials. I think you've answered the questions that I was thinking about. I've written down on my notebook food security and resilience, and you've mentioned resilience a few times already and in your responses to Ariane Burgess. But it's really just to focus that there are the 3 main producer organisations in Scotland, and then there's other people that are collaborating, like the Scottish Seaweed Industry Association. So there's different routes for other people to seek funding and support. So I think my point was basically this is about the fruit and vegetable producer organisations getting the support that they absolutely need in order to provide resilience in food production. And there are other mechanisms of support for other smaller producers as well. That's basically what I'm asking.
Yes, there is. Can we do more? Yes. Are we actively looking at do more? Yes. But in terms of putting that resilience of the types of food that we want grown in Scotland, I think this is an essential SSI that we need to pass. If you look, it's soft fruit, it's root veg, brassicas, vining peas. Those are the kind of things that we're putting support into. the very kind of things I think we should absolutely be doing more to support, and that's why I would like us to pass this SSI.
And explore other opportunities to support other growers, small market gardeners or whatever, using other mechanisms.
Indeed.
Okay, thanks.
Tim Eagle.
Much. Good morning, Minister. Apologies if I'm going to try and repeat, but I want to get some facts right. My understanding is the Fruit and Vegetable Aid Scheme was brought in 1997. Is that correct? The Fruit and Veg Aid Scheme, which is what we're talking about, was brought in 1997. It's a 25-year-old scheme.
Time, but I don't know if Danny knows the,
my research would suggest it is 1997.
Yeah.
So 25 years ago, do you think the market's changed in that time?
The market has undoubtedly changed in that time, but the programmes that each of the producer organisations bring forward will have changed in that time. And the legislation sets out the range of things that they can choose to have in their scheme, from production planning, product quality improvement, environmental measures. It's up to the producer organisations to decide what they put forward for funding. So it's a sector that is very well adapted to the changing sort of market conditions.
It's absolutely changed, given the fact that we've now got berries being grown in coir rather than peat. So, yes, and that's, as George has said, that's exactly the function. These people know their business better than anyone.
Yep.
They know what market trends are. They know how to look at their pricing. They know where their market challenges are going to be. And that's the function of this, is to give them the tools and the foresight and the collaboration to be able to say, how do we make sure that we put resilience into our sector?
But do you think the market has also changed away from producer organisations, which is at the heart of this scheme?
Well, I would suggest that producer organisations, collaboration, working together is probably more important now than ever. So I would suggest that there's far more need for far more collaboration right across all areas of the sector.
But that's not the question I'm asking. Cooperatives and producer organisations might be a good thing in some sense, but this scheme is still very much hinged on producer organisations because that's where the money goes. But actually the market out there, as in terms of small-scale producers that are selling just to local markets, may not go through producer organisations. So it has changed. You would agree with that?
I'm not quite sure which direction you're trying to take that question, so you're going to have to rephrase it for me.
Let's go to something else then. So we left the EU in 2020. Yeah. So am I right in thinking that you don't have to have this scheme in place? You could have put in place a new market garden scheme?
Yes, we could have.
Yes. So you don't have to have this scheme. So we don't need this SSI because it was completely within the dissolved responsibilities of the Scottish Parliament, the Scottish Government, to bring forward a whole new scheme, correct?
No, we do need this SSI, because right now we are where we are. We haven't brought forward another scheme, but what we have done is we've continued to support a scheme that was helping us put resilience in our fruit and veg and small producer scheme. So, yes, there is a need to pass this SSI in order to protect that. Is there scope for us to do more? Yes, I've already stated that to at least 3 other members. Could we have done something sooner? Potentially, but I wasn't part of the government at that point, so I have no idea what the discussions were when those early discussions were happening. What I can tell you is we can pass this SSI today, we can give security to that part of the industry, we can then focus on the other areas where we're going to start developing policy to allow us to put that resilience in that I've already explained to the other members of the committee.
I realise you might not have been part of the government, but the government was the government. so it doesn't really matter who the minister in charge is. What matters is the flow of work over a period of time. Mr Burgess, who's sitting next to you, asked for information on a new market garden support scheme in February 2024. So it's over a year and a half ago. Where is that now?
So maybe just to deal with the earlier question, first of all, it's the Agriculture and Rural Communities Scotland Act that would give us the powers to create a new scheme or to make substantial changes to the existing scheme. At the moment, this instrument is brought forward under the powers in the 2020 Act, which are relatively limited in scope. So it's the 2024 Act that will give us the new powers. Yes, indeed, there were proposals provided to me by Joe Hunt from Knockfarrell in early 2020, and those are part of the consideration that's ongoing just now as to what support we can provide.
So I guess the question I'm trying to ask then is why is that not before us now? We've had 5 years since EU exit. You've had 5 years. We've already, the Agriculture and Rural Communities Act went through over a year ago. We still haven't seen the Rural Support Plan. I might come on to that in a second. So why are we now talking about a scheme that no doubt has done great things over its 25 years, but the market has moved? And we need a scheme now that actually brings in everybody. It is within your powers to do that. You could have scrapped this and brought something forward. So why are we not talking about that?
Well, it might be interesting to follow developments south of the border, where, of course, the fruit and veg aid scheme that we're talking about here has been wound down, but actually nothing has been put in its place, either for producer organisations or small producers. So I'm not sure that that's the situation we would want to get into. So it's part of the considerations the Minister has said already several times about how we support those in the fruit and veg sector, producer organisations, small producers and all.
We've put the Small Producers Pilot Fund in place. So we're giving very clear signals that this is an area that is vitally important, that we're looking at as a government, and that we will bring proposals forward in order to make sure we put the resilience in that I've continuously talked about in this session.
Yeah, I think, I mean, in relation to Mr Burgess's answer there, every time the Minister is before us, Minister, you will comment on something going on south of the border and how much better we are than them. I don't have information on what's going on south of the border. What matters to me is what's going on in Scotland. Here, well, the fact is we don't have information.
It should bother you, because the reason we're bringing this SSI forward is because what they have done down south is actually now putting pressure on our budget. That means that we have to pass this SSI, or we get into a position...
No, you could have brought a new scheme in place by now. Let's ask, so you said earlier on, clearer thinking on what we can do more, on how we can do more. You've had 5 years to do thinking. Is Mr Burgess's department got enough staff? We haven't seen the Rural Support Plan. We don't know what's going on. Greening, NFUS are arguing against. My understanding is that the Good Food Nation SSIs have now all been pulled. So do you think we've got a fair point in saying, actually, what is going on behind the scenes with the future of agricultural policy in Scotland?
No, I don't.
No, you don't?
No, I don't. You've got a rural support, you've got a route map that people know exactly what it is that's coming. When the timescales of that is going to happen, we are yet to ascertain, because whenever you dig into any box, it gets far more complex than you originally thought. There are things that you need to try and flesh out. So we are putting the stability into the sector. We've managed to maintain direct support. We've managed to maintain the voluntary couple support. We're maintaining LFAS. We're making changes which some people think are not going far enough, others think are going too far. So there's no simple way of doing this. There is no simple way of getting to the point where everybody just says, yeah, this is fantastic. Unless you do what they did down south, with saying, there's your policy, it was an absolute disaster. We're determined that that's not going to happen up here.
Well, I don't think we're doing anything up here. Kate Rowe said back in March, there is a real lack of certainty amongst farmers. They do not know what is coming. Pete Ritchie, and I believe you got an email from Pete Ritchie and Vicky Swales, a letter, yesterday. We are in a holding pattern. We are expecting a big bang, but there is just a very small squeak at the moment. That's what they said back in March. Now, I understand you got a letter yesterday that meant that 3 significant organisations have now just resigned from ARIOB, all saying that the Rural Support Plan is weak. It won't now come until the new year. Do you have any comments on that this morning?
In terms of the fact that they're waiting for a big bang, I told this committee that there's not going to be a big bang. We don't intend to have a big bang. What we intend to do is transition from the policies that we've had into the policies that we're going to deliver. And we'll be doing that by having conversations. Now, if people are stepping down from the ARIOB on the basis of they don't think that it's going fast enough or going far enough in their direction, that is entirely up to them. That is their decision to make. But asking for something and not getting it doesn't mean to say that you haven't been listened to. What it means is that the government have taken a position in the round. How do we deliver a transition that allows people to continue to farm? They will have to do more for the farming that they're doing, and how we get to a position where they come with us. However, none of that has got anything to do with the SSI that is in front of us, which is about protecting the producer organisation groups that give stability to the fruit and veg aid scheme for the people who are producing fruit and veg for Scotland?
See, this is where we disagree, because I think it's got everything to do with what's in front of us, because this is divide and rule, isn't it? Bring forward tiny little parts of the segment, and we talk about those individually, but we never talk about the overall message of what we're trying to send. And the overall message is that on both sides of the argument, pretty much every stakeholder out there is saying we're not going anywhere fast enough. And that's not about major cliff edges, that's just about actually a direction of change and the new policy that needs that. But let's go back to this then. The fundamental point...
Hold on 1 second. You've just said to me that everybody's saying we're not going far enough, fast enough, and yet I was sitting here with an SSI 2 weeks ago where I was being told you're going far too fast, slow down. I'm sorry.
That's not what I'm saying.
Well,
you plucked a 7% figure out the air under greening. Let's go back to this, though. The fact is, you could have come up with a whole new scheme. There is nothing on you that means this scheme had to go forward. You could have put in place today a brand new scheme that would have taken all sectors, all sections of the market into it and allowed proper funding specifically for Scotland. That is true, isn't it?
It may well be, but that's not what we're doing. What we're doing is protecting a system that currently works. And
But it doesn't work, because you've got people that are telling us that it doesn't work.
It maybe doesn't work for them, but it absolutely works for ensuring that Scotland has got a vibrant fruit and veg group of people who are growing the fruit and veg, the kind of products that we want grown here in Scotland. So it's working for them, it's working for Scotland PLC. It might not be working for individuals, but I've already stated to the other members of the committee, I'm more than happy to continue to look at how we give them more support. We've put the Small Producers Pilot Fund in place. I am absolutely committed to looking at how we do more for them, at the same time providing the stability for those that are living in LFA areas, providing the stability for that group of people who are living in the most remote areas, and making sure that we've got the basic payment scheme that is currently in place still functioning. So you're asking an awful lot to say, well, you could have come here with a better scheme. Yes, we could have, but we also worked on making sure we gave that stability, and we're transitioning at a pace that allows the farming community to come with us, but at the same time make sure that we're getting the delivery on the biodiversity and the carbon emissions that we're looking for.
One final question. Will we see the new rural support plan before the end of tomorrow with the market garden scheme in it?
Before the end of tomorrow?
Yeah. Well, you said you were going to give it to us before the end of December.
No, we won't.
Okay. Thank you.
Just in the back of Tim's question, we did write to you, Minister, asking for an update in the rural support plan. We've yet to have a response. However, stakeholders are reporting that they've been told that the rural support plan won't be published before Christmas. Now, I'm not going to put you on the spot on this, and there's also real concerns that the main advisory panel you have, ARIOB, has seen three the main players resign, and what they are saying is failure in both the policy development process and farming policy decisions the governments are making as a reason for withdrawing from the group. These are serious accusations on how ARIOB functions. I'd say I'm not going to put you on the spot today, but the committee will write to you to ask for your comments on what's happening with ARIOB, and also an urgent update on where we are with the rural support plan.
I appreciate you not asking me, because you've probably seen that as quickly as I have. There was no request to come and speak to myself or the Cabinet Secretary about their decision to resign. So we will digest the information that has been given to us at the same time as it was given to everybody else. We may have got an embargoed version several hours before it was put out, I think. Yes, we did. We had an embargoed version, but we've only found this out very, very late in the day. There was no request for the discussion. There was no request for the debate about it. So we are still a little bit in the dark as to why this has happened.
Okay, thank for that. But we will write. But as I say, we're not going to put you in the spot on that today until you've had reasonable time to deal with it. We've got a question from Alistair Allen.
Thanks, Convener. If I can cut to the chase, we've heard questions about hypothetical other schemes, or should there be other schemes. But I understand that there are some other schemes like the small producer scheme. But what we're looking at today, as you've set out, is a very specific SSI in the interests of Scottish growers. Have you an indication from that sector what their feeling would be today were we not to pass this SSI?
I don't think I'd be over-emphasising to say that they would see it as catastrophic. All of the conversations that I had with those producer groups in the earlier part of my being asked to be a minister and have this in my responsibility was the emphasis of how important this is to allow them to continue to adapt, to continue to find new ways of working, to continue to be able to work on their marketing. It is vitally important to them. But the other thing that they've also stressed to me is how incredibly delicate their market is to them. The price fluctuations, things like Enix coming in, putting massive pressure on their ability to be profitable. If they're not profitable, they can't invest. If they can't make a profit, then they can't continue to do what it is they're doing. And what we're trying to do is make sure we've got a vibrant sector. Scotland produces the best berries in the world, and yet it's not viable for people. So therefore, we want to make sure that we're giving them all the tools that we can right now to continue producing some of the best fruit in the world.
Thank you.
Can I just, for clarification, you said it would be catastrophic. Are you suggesting that this SSI is not passed today, there will be no funding for Scottish POs?
Well, there can't be.
Sorry, Minister, could you answer that question? Thank you, Mr Burgess.
There will still be funding. There will still be funding in English as well.
Yes, sorry. My apologies. I misspoke. Yes, there would be funding, but would also be funding other organisations that would come up from...
But you said it would be catastrophic, so that is not accurate.
Well, it is accurate. It would be catastrophic.
So what way would it be catastrophic? Because
it would mean
it just would mean that your cap wouldn't apply to the budget. It would just mean that some of the Scottish budget could potentially go to support growers out with Scotland, but it's not going to limit, currently, if this is not passed, the amount of money that POs in Scotland might get.
It would be a huge burden on the Scottish Government to be able to fund producers from other parts of the UK, which would then require us to say, is this something that we can continue with? Right. So yes.
So not catastrophic?
Well, it would be catastrophic if we then decided that we can no longer fund that.
What I interpreted from your response to Dr Allen was that if we didn't pass this today, it would be like falling off a cliff edge. That funding would dry up. The POs in Scotland wouldn't get their funding. That is not the case.
Well, it could be the case, because we would then have to make a decision as to whether or not we were going to continue to fund it at that level.
Okay. My issue, I suppose, is that, yeah, we can argue that the scheme has had benefits, but my interpretation of the responses from the stakeholders, that's the scheme as it is at the moment, the legacy scheme, the scheme that we've had for 25 years, no longer matches the scale of innovation or investment that's required in the sector. It no longer focuses on exactly what the Scottish growers need, and it will not be fit for purpose when it comes to collective investment, new varieties, technological advances, and will actually put Scotland at a risk of losing ground to other producers. And the reason the scheme has been withdrawn from the rest of the UK is because they don't believe it's fit for purpose, and there's other ways to support the sector. So there is a sense that continuing in the old scheme, and it's a very old scheme, stifles progress and delays potential competitiveness, policies that will help reduce labour costs, automation, climate pressures. We've got the same old. And it's another example of this government just not making the decisions that we need. We left Europe almost 10 years ago. You've had 5 years to produce a new plan, something that was fit for purpose, but what we're seeing is the same old plan being taken on, and that's reflective of everything that's come out of the Agriculture Department over the last few years. And there's huge frustration, and I would suggest that's why we've seen the resignations for Mario. There is just no progress being made at all. So why have you not brought forward a scheme which is fit for the next generations of growers? And why are we going to lock ourselves into another 3 years of an EU legacy scheme?
So you're saying that the reason that they decided to scrap the scheme down south was because there are better ways of doing it. Well, where is it? Where is the better ways of doing it? Where was the offer to come and offer a UK-wide similar scheme that would allow the same level of support, funding and innovation? There isn't one. There is nothing there. So Yes, we are keeping an old scheme because we know currently that it works. You say that stakeholders are telling you that it's not keeping up to date. It's the stakeholders that are keeping it up to date. They're the ones who are making the decisions about what it is that they are trying to do. They're the ones who have told me it's going to be a disaster if you do away with this scheme. We've heard rumours that it's going to happen down south. Please don't do the same thing up here. So we're hearing different things, I have to tell you, Convener.
Yeah, I think it's not about the scheme, it's about the funding.
The plan currently works because the producer organisations that I have spoken to are telling me this works. This gives us the certainty over a 3-year period, which is what this SSI will do rather than a 2-year period, in order to continue to develop and grow in a very competitive market. And there's no scheme that came from down south. So therefore, what do? Do we just scrap it all together and say, let's wait and see what the UK does? I'm afraid I'm not prepared to do that.
Ariane Burgess.
Thanks, Convener. I just wanted to come back to something that George Burgess said, but it was around the... So it's about... I think one of the things we're trying to get at here is that, yes, you're continuing this, and it's to do with the fact that there's English producers that could access the Scottish budget. So not catastrophic, but concerning around tapping into the budget. But there's an exclusivity in that programme because it means that people who are market gardeners or direct-to-sales people can't get into those schemes. So George Burgess talked about the £1 million turnover and the 5 producer organisations minimum, but there's, I think, also a requirement to contribute. So there's a requirement to contribute 100% or at least 75% of what you produce into the producer organisation. And if you're in a direct-to-sales setup where you're selling direct to your customers already, then that's not going to work for you. So people are trying to access this funding because it gives the support, the kinds of supports around production planning and quality improvement and all that kind of thing. They want access to that kind of support that helps them develop and grow. But they can't because this producer organisation requirement doesn't fit their business model, which is what we've seen is more and more people are selling direct to market or small-scale market gardeners who produce locally. And Minister, I know you're very fond of farmers' markets, for example, in Scotland, having been involved in setting up the first one. So I think that's the problem here, is that we've got the design of an SSI. I hear you're saying it's working for the 3 POs that support a number of farmers, but it's excluding a whole lot of other people who really, really are doing the best that they can and really struggling with the conditions in terms of climate and nature challenges. And they're feeding people. In Scotland, they're doing that good food nation resilience that we really need to be seeing happening. So I think that, for me, is the piece, is kind of... And I think also I wanted to kind of flag up a piece around an implication that if you're not in a PO, you don't want to collaborate. I don't think that's true. I think there are people who are small producers who can't be in producer organisations who are incredibly collaborative, or there are small producers who are in parts of Scotland where the geography makes it really difficult to collaborate in some of the ways that potentially POs would ask them to do so. So I hear the need to pass this SSI, although I am kind of concerned that why are we hurrying to do it if they've already got existing contracts and these existing POs are okay for, what, another 18 months or so or something?
They're on at the end of this year.
So it's at the end of this year. And then the other piece is I got an impression from something that was said that other people next year could set up a PO and get involved. Is that the case, or is this just exclusive to these 4 POs?
Debbie.
So this SSI would create application windows every 3 years. So the application window for the 2026 operational programmes has closed now. So it would be...
2029?
Yes.
Would be the next time that anyone could access. So even if people decided, right, we're going to get together and we're going to we're going to decide we're going to put 100% of our produce in, it's 3 years before they can actually get involved in tapping into this very important £3 million fund.
But you're saying that as though that's exclusively the only thing they can do. It's not. we will, as I've said...
But we're not hearing that. I think that's the problem, is we're not
I don't know how many times
concrete...
I've said it this morning. I am actively looking. We've got the Small Producer Pilot Fund, and I'm actively looking at how we put more resilience into making sure we give those small producers the comfort to know that this government's going to back
Can you
them.
give us a timescale? Actively looking
No,
doesn't
I
build
can't.
confidence.
Not right now.
Thank you. I've got Emma Harper and then Alistair Allan.
Thanks, Convener. It's just, I mean, I'm going back a few minutes now, but you used an acronym, ENIX, and that's something that, just for the purpose of the official report, that's the Employers' National Insurance that was introduced by the UK Government, that exerts another barrier on the producer organisations. So I just want to clarify, Minister, that that's what you meant by that acronym.
Yes, there's a major pressure on... This industry is incredibly labour-intensive. So the ENIX, the National Insurance Contributions, has put a massive pressure on their funds, and as a result of that, they are increasingly finding themselves struggling to make it work.
And that's something, again, that we don't have any control over, setting those rates in Scotland?
No, we don't.
Okay.
Allan.
Thank you, Convener. Again, I have to come back to the consequences of the choice before us here. So, am I right in saying from what you've said, Minister, that not passing this SSI means opening up schemes to production in England?
Yes.
What would be the consequences of that in terms of trying to find that in your budget, and what cuts would you have to look at?
It would very much depend on how many applied. I don't know what we are in terms of, has there been any indication? We know that it's happened elsewhere. But in terms of, if we were going to have to expand the budget, then it would have to come out of the agricultural budget that we currently have.
So I find it incredible that whatever people's views are, and I hate to repeat myself, but whatever people's views are about this SSI, whatever people's views are about potential alternative schemes, I can't really see why anyone I just can't understand why anyone on this committee would feel it would be responsible politics to put the government in a position where it would have to cut the agriculture budget because of this situation. So, again, I ask, have we any indication of what the different parts of the agriculture sector would think about the Scottish Government being put in that position?
No, I haven't asked them. I know that NFU Scotland are very keen for this SSI to be passed. What I wouldn't want to do is start pitching one group of food producers and farmers in Scotland against another. We've seen that done already. I don't think it's something that we should be doing. I'm asking for this SSI to be passed to allow us to put stability into a scheme that we know that works. There may be members here who believe that it doesn't work, but I'm absolutely convinced that it does. And I'm giving the assurance that I have firmly got my eyes on how we put more resilience into the small producers that Ariane Burgess has mentioned a number of times, and that we are both agreed are vitally important to our long-term sustainability, our biodiversity, and everything else that small producers bring to the table. So, getting this bit done allows us then to move on to the next bit. I'm not prepared to sit here and I take the point that Alistair Allan's making. I very much want to just focus on, will the committee pass this SSI? Allow us to do that and then move on to the next bit that allows us to then put more stability into other areas of the agricultural policy that we're currently developing.
Thank you, Convener.
Just for clarity, again, back to your statement, you thought it would be catastrophic if we didn't do this. I would like to put it into context. You're suggesting that the budget for this is £3 million. Is that correct?
That's the current budget for it.
So, will that £3 million go up or down whether we exclude producers in other parts of the United Kingdom or not? Is the budget fixed?
Well, that would very much depend on how many other producers join Scottish POs.
So is the £3 million fixed?
If there are 20 of them join and that suddenly put a demand for 50 million on it, I'm right in saying that we can't change that. We would have to legally, and because we can't change the scheme, because George Eustace decided to make that a reserved function, because we can't change the scheme, we would then be legally obliged to pay that £50 million. So we could have any number of small producer organisations from England who've had their scheme scrapped, taken out in front of them, decide to join POs up here, not a thing that we could do about it, and whatever that budget was, it had become out of our agriculture budget.
So
there's nothing we could do about that.
Sorry, I'm a bit confused. So what is the 3 million?
The 3 million, Debbie, I'll let you explain the technicalities.
3 million is what we have traditionally paid out, roughly round about that for the last few years. So the scheme operates on the funding for it is it's match funded, so you'd either be paying 50% of what the producer organisation would be funding themselves, or 4.1% of their value of marketed production. So that can also move as the PO becomes more productive, but so there's no cap. We don't have a cap. We don't have the ability to put in that cap. So as long as it meets everything meets the eligibility criteria, the actions they're asking for all meets the criteria, matches the strategy, we have to fund that. So if you had many producer organisations joining our scheme, we would have to currently fund that.
But you won't have any more producer organisations because it's fixed for 3 years, because there's only 3 at the moment, and that's how many there will be for the next 3 years.
Under this current SSI.
Is that
If we pass this SSI.
So you're suggesting that actually if we don't pass this SSI, there could be more producer organisations set up in Scotland? Okay, that's not what we understood. But the question from Ariane Burgess suggested that it's a 3-year cycle. If you're not in it now, you can't join for another 3 years.
If we pass the SSI.
So there's a 3-year period for the operational programme, but without this SSI, you can start that at any year. So this SSI would bring everybody onto the same 3-year programme. It happens that right now our producer organisations are on the same timeline, but they didn't need to be.
I'm still a bit confused. So right now, if we don't pass this SSI, in 6 months' time we could see 8 or 9 producer organisations set up in Scotland.
Yes.
That would have access to that fund?
Yes.
Okay. Right, thank you. Rhoda Grant.
I'm concerned as to what I've heard this morning, in that you don't believe there's anything wrong with this scheme and you have no intention of changing it if we pass this SSI. But also you've said that if we don't pass the SSI, that forces your hand to act. So it feels to me like the only way we can get any change is to vote against this SSI, which would then force you to act about the concerns that were raised here today. I came here fully intending to vote for this SSI, but from what I've heard, the only way that we can get change for the people who have concerns is not to pass it. Am I right?
No. No, you're not. I've already gave a number of answers to yourself, to Ariane Burgess and to various other members of this committee that I am actively looking at how we put more support into small producers right across the country. The purpose of this SSI is to support a group of food producers who are doing an incredible amount of work, doing fantastic work in their areas. They are innovating, they are driving the market, they are doing all the things that we are requiring them to do with a fund of money which is in danger of being increased beyond our control by other producer organisations who could join from other parts of the UK, and we wouldn't be able to control that. So that's the only purpose for this SSI. It's got absolutely nothing to do with the intention of this government and how we're going to help to support small producers going forward. Now, you and I have had these conversations in here before, and you asked me to change something because there was an issue. And when there's an issue, I went away, I looked at it, and we came up with a solution for that. So I hope that that gives you some comfort, that I don't sit here to try and blindside or to pull the wool over your eyes. I'm doing everything that I possibly can to make sure that we've got a resilient industry that has got the backing of a government, that has got the funding that it needs insofar as we can provide it, given the restraints that are on our budgets, to be able to make sure that there is a resilient industry going forward for the whole of Scotland. I've done that time and time again. This SSI is entirely about protecting one system that works, and it does work, and I'm going to dispute that all day long. It works because the people who are producing this food are telling me that it works, so therefore I'm taking their word for it. So I don't know what it is that you're looking for to force my hand on. I don't know where you think that you're going to push me in order to get something that you think I'm not prepared to do. I don't understand what it is that you're actually asking of me, because I've given commitments right throughout this session about what it is that I'm trying to do in order to protect agriculture in Scotland, and that's from small scalers to big producers.
What you've said is that if we pass this SSI today, it's business as usual for the next 3 years.
It's business as usual for this particular group of growers.
If I can finish my point, but there are people who are saying they have no, Scottish producers who have no access to this funding, and that's not fair, it's not equitable, and you say you're looking at other things, but we have no guarantee the other things are coming. If you could give us a time frame on when you're looking for some support to come forward for the folk who are locked out from this funding, then that would be something. But at the moment, all you're saying is the only tool we have to get something for the people who are locked out of this funding is to vote down this SSI to force you then to act. Can you give us something that would give us comfort for those people who are concerned?
I've already stated we've got the Small Producers Pilot Fund that is running at the moment.
It's a pilot.
Pardon?
It's just a pilot. It's not going. There's no guarantee that funding will go forward.
The purpose of the pilot is to give us some understanding of what the things are that people are looking for, and I have actively got officials and stakeholders looking at how we can put better support in order to ensure we put that resilience in that Ariane Rogers raised with me right at the start. That's actively happening right now.
And when will that come into place?
It will come into play when I'm satisfied that the solutions that they've come up with and the funding packages that they've come up with give us that long-term resilience and is equitable, and it does what it is that we need it to do as far as our policy objectives are concerned. So I'm not concerned about the fact that people might be impatient. What I'm concerned about is making sure we get it right. And I've got officials working on that right now with stakeholders.
So I think one of the things we established earlier is one of the challenges around the whole PO, producer organisation piece, is that the definition of it is reserved. And does that mean that it's the requirement to be £1 million and 100% or 75% and the minimum of 5? So, and I hear you want to keep this because it's not so much about, I think what we've understood, it's not so much about protecting the 3 producer organisations, it's preventing people south of the border tapping into the Scottish budget. Yep. And I think it was fascinating to hear that actually if we didn't pass this SSI, starting next year, more people could tap into that £3 million. So could it be possible that the government, instead of doing this producer organisation scheme, and I'm hearing all your reasons of why you want to keep it because it works for those 3 producer organisations, could it be possible instead to actually step back and say, let's create a fruit and veg scheme? This is the first SSI, the first Scottish SSI that has directly addressed fruit and veg. Surely we should have an SSI that is saying, let's fund all fruit and vegetable producers. We'll take a percentage of the Scottish agricultural budget, whatever that is, 4% or something, and give that to any producer and have them be able to access it. And rather than creating this exclusionary thing that's kind of odd, it's like we're saying, you're asking us to pass an SSI that would say, Sports 3 doesn't let anyone else come in for the next 4 years. If we didn't support it, more producers' organisations could set up and get into action. And it is interesting also that over a number of years, we had 11 producer organisations, we've only got 3. So we're creating, right, we've got down to 3, then we're creating this exclusion through this SSI that only allows those 3 to continue. And in the meantime, we've got a lot of other producers that are really wanting and needing that access to all of the things that could help them really produce that food for Scotland.
So as we've said, that the producer organisations as they currently stand, they're putting resilience into our food and drink sector. They are under the cosh on a constant basis. They are constantly fighting margins. And I'm determined that what we should do is make sure that those people are protected right now because they are at the vanguard. But that doesn't change the commitments that I've given to this committee, not just today, on a number of occasions, that I'm actively looking at how we're going to support that local level of food production right across the country through whatever those schemes look like. I've just given the answer to Rhoda Grant that we have the Small Producers Pilot Fund, but in addition we have officials currently looking with stakeholders how we do some creative thinking, because what you've just described sounds dead easy until you start looking at the detail, and all of a sudden the complexity of it is massive. So therefore, we've got people working on it right now. How do we make this happen? And it won't be a big bang. It won't be some grand announcement. It will be things that will happen in a gradual way to allow people to develop and grow into their businesses. We've been watching small producers for the last 28 years attend farmers' markets, then go into farm shops and do other things. There are routes there. We are in a better position now than we have ever been in terms of what it was. If I think back to my early days as a shepherd to where we are now, we are in a different world entirely. That evolution will continue. That evolution is exactly the kind of thing that I want to see happening in Scotland to make sure that we've got the kind of food system that you and I think, absolutely share. So all I can do is give you my reassurance that this is something that I am passionate about, that I want to make sure that happens. What we're looking at today is protecting the producer organisations who are currently providing the vast majority of our fruit and veg. And if there are people who feel as though they're shut out, then I'll give them the reassurance that we're actively looking at how we can make sure we can support them as well.
I think still the challenge is that we don't have a timescale on that. And I feel like I've had those conversations with you right off the back of the rural, Agriculture and Rural Communities Act becoming an act. You know, had those conversations, had them during the process of the act. And so no timescales. And I've also had an experience in this past year with a piece of legislation where I had a minister and 2 different cabinet secretaries giving assurances around things that I was advocating for on behalf of stakeholders. So I don't have a sense that it is enough to have, with apologies, Minister, your assurances and the fact that we're kind of heading very, very quickly into an election. This is not about me. It's about those vegetable and fruit producers who really need that support, who have been talking and asking and coming up with proposals and suggestions for that support, and not feeling like anything is really happening. So I think this committee needs to start to see timescales and some more information about really what you're looking at.
Okay, point taken.
Emma Roddick.
Minister, I just wanted to pick up on the previous back and forth with Rhoda Grant around the Small Producers Pilot Fund. Can you give any reassurances about that pilot fund moving forward and what the Scottish Government's intentions are if that's going to continue for the foreseeable future?
In terms of, are we going to continue with it? So
We've
got a fund right now that's sitting at £500,000. We're going to have to wait and see what that develops and what that grows into. But I can only say the same thing to yourself as I've said to Ariane Burgess. We're doing this on the basis that we want to see what is the best way to support small producers right across the country in order to make them the bedrock of our food producing systems as we go forward. I'm giving a commitment that that is exactly what I want to see happen. We're still going to have to work through what the details of that looks like, because it's complex, because different areas need different things, different producers need different support mechanisms. For some of them it's innovation, for some of them it's marketing, for some of them it's facilities. And we need to work out what that looks like, what level of funding would we need to put into that, and at the same time how that affects the other areas of balance that we currently have. So it's not a simple thing to do. This is a complex issue,
yes,
but it's one that I'm prepared and absolutely committed to making sure we get right.
I appreciate it's complex, but I suppose what I'm asking is what the pilot fund is doing right now and the gaps that it's filling. That's something that the government intends to carry on with in some form.
Yeah, the gaps that it's currently filling at the moment, where are we spending this money specifically at the moment?
Well, at the moment, the fund has just opened, so we're now waiting to see which small producers, be it fruit and veg, be it livestock production, come forward. So that will then help identify exactly what the needs are. Obviously, we'll be publishing the budget into January, which will look at 26, 27, and so we'll be looking at what capital and revenue support is available in that budget. So the Small Producers Pilot Fund that has just opened is for the current financial year, but I think, as the Minister said, it's a pilot fund. You don't pilot something with the intention of that being just a one-off. We will be looking at what support is provided for small producers in future years.
Thank you.
Emma, you indicated earlier you wish to come in.
I just think that we've been round and round the houses long enough. We need to probably just affirm that if this doesn't pass, Scottish budget for agriculture will be funding English producer organisations, and our budget is needing to be protected enough and so that we can support our own producers, and then that money can be used to diversify and support other producers also.
There is the potential that producers growing in England could be POs here in Scotland, yes.
Alistair Allen.
Thanks, Convener. Likewise, I'm not sure that we've got much more, any of us, to add to this, but I think Emma Harper there talked about some of the consequences of not passing the SSI, and Ariane talked, as mentioned, about the impact of, or the importance rather, of small producers. So can I return to this? Can I ask specifically what would be the impact on the small producers sector of not passing this SSI?
It will not have any impact on small producers for not passing this SSI. The people it will affect will be the people who are in the POs at the moment. So that's where the effect is. But do not underestimate the value that it is to them. And right now they are producing.
I was thinking more of the budgetary. Sorry, I should have said more of the budgetary impact that you talked about before. Will that have an impact on the smaller sector?
Sorry,
the budgetary impact of not passing an SSI and the pressures elsewhere in your budget, would that have an impact on other parts of this sector?
I'm sorry, I'm being a bit dense. Could you rephrase that question?
You mentioned before that if the SSI were not to pass,
yes,
and that would have a budgetary implication in how you use the rest of your agriculture budget.
Sorry, right, okay, yes. As it currently stands, we could not stop other POs joining the Scottish system. Depending on how many of them were, we have no mechanism to stop them, and whatever those plans are that they put in, there would be no mechanism for us to say no to that. We would be legally obliged to fund that, and whatever that happens to be, we would then have the obligation to fund that, whatever that was. The implications of that are dependent on the size of the POs that would come in and how much money they would take out of the budget, and we would have an ability to be able to say no.
Thank you.
Have you an indication of how many POs may be minded to join the Scottish scheme?
Do we have an indication?
Not of how many are minded to join the scheme, no. I mean, I think there's, in England, there was around 29 and quite a large budget to it, but I don't know how much interest there is for coming up to Scotland.
Okay. Tim Eagle.
Sorry, I shouldn't have pressed that. I think we are starting to go round and round, but this is quite an important point, isn't it? I was desperately searching the EU regulations. In the original EU regulations, when this came out, it says, in order to control union expenditure, there should be a cap on assistance granted to producer organisations and their associations that establish operational funds. And I've managed to find something else, which is basically suggesting it is possible, or it was possible, to set an overall cap. Because it seems quite odd, doesn't it, that you can have a fund where loads of people can come in. So just for absolute clarity, because I'll go away and ask a whole load of questions afterwards, and I'm not saying that what I've read there is right. But just for absolute clarity, as you understand it, the budget could be exponential in size, and there's nothing that you can do to stop that.
Yes, that's correct.
Well,
James.
sorry. We do have powers within the Agriculture Retained Deal Act to change the cap, but we would, if this didn't pass, we'd have to come back and look at the cap, which would obviously have an impact on the amount of funding that's being accessed at the moment by Scottish producers.
Okay, but 6 months ago, you granted to 3 organisations the funding package for the next 2 years, if I'm right in saying that. Is that correct?
We agreed at the start of the year how much we've agreed for the next programme. So the applications window for that was September. They had to apply for with confirmation in December.
So in theory, if we didn't pass this today, you would have time to come back with a new SSI or whatever the mechanism would be before any new funding period in order to cap it, would you?
No. So there was a statutory deadline to confirm to producer organisations if they have their funding, and that was the 15th of December, so Monday.
Okay, so despite the fact that 3 existing recipients have all had their funding offers confirmed for the next 2 years, which started 6 months ago, it is still possible. I know we've been around this before, but just for absolute clarity, because it needs to be on record, because this is going to get heavily checked in the background, I suspect, it is still true that English producers could come into any one of these POs, maintaining that PO over £1 million, so they get access to the scheme, increase the budget, and the Scottish Government budget would have to pay for that.
Yes, it couldn't begin in January 26. It would have to begin in January 27. So they've missed the 26 window, but they could start in 27.
Right, but that's over a year away. So what stops us coming back with a cap on the budget, as just been suggested by Mr Hamilton then?
Because the next scheme starts in January 2026, so the existing caps would apply initially. So we wouldn't be able to change that.
And you didn't think about this before? Did this never crop up in conversations behind the scenes?
That's why we consulted back in the summer on this set of changes. You know, we could see the
2 days after, a solution to most of the issues that are raised today have already been put in place. 2 days before we consider this. I think it feels like some of the options that might have been open to the committee to ask you to explore have sort of been taken out of our hands.
It's December the 17th. You're basically coming to me today as a member of this committee and saying to me, hey, agree this, and if you don't, we're really scuppered. So I've got no option. I'm being forced into doing a scheme that I don't think is right, with a whole load of stuff that Ariane Burgess has very well presented today that we don't even think is right for the market, but there's nothing we can do about it because it's too late in the day, and it doesn't sound like this has actually been discussed behind the scenes, that there might be a huge impact on the Scottish budget if we don't approve the SSSI.
So
you're forcing my hand.
You're saying it wasn't discussed behind the scenes. It was a consultation. It was consulted on.
I'm talking about what's been discussed within Mr Burgess's department. Because we've got a hand tied behind our back here, completely. OK, we're going round in circles.
I'm going to bring in the last contribution. Very briefly, please, Ariane.
Yeah, very briefly. I mean, I think that was revelatory and kind of also adding more confusion in a way. But I think there's also a piece that's possibly going on here, which is that there's a couple of different needs. There's in terms of what happens with the agricultural budget, and there are people who are wanting to produce food that feeds people in Scotland and locally produce that and direct to sale and all of that. And then there's the producer organisations. I mean, my research shows that they actually, a very, very small percentage of what they actually grow feeds people in Scotland. It goes for exports goes to the south of the border and potentially elsewhere. So I wonder if we need to be looking at and acknowledging that there's actually 2 different strands. There's a whole kind of almost commodity side to agriculture and food production that's going for further afield and export. And then there's that good food nation approach that we need to be supporting those local producers so that when climate change and nature breakdown really hit, people in the islands or on the islands or where other rural communities can actually get food. that is locally produced.
In terms of the contracts that producer organisations have, that's up to supermarkets to decide where they're going to put their product. I find it absolutely scandalous that we are sitting in Perthshire and yet I'm still buying berries from Kent. So we can't change that. What we can do is make sure that there's resilience within the producer organisations who are currently producing food here in Scotland. Whether it gets exported or not, they're still producing food here in Scotland. To give them the protection over the next 3 years that they have told us that that's what they want. But you're right, there are two different strands here, and I will repeat again. My commitment is to make sure that that small producer cohort that will put that the biodiversity benefits, the environmental benefits, the local food resilience benefits, the local economy benefits, all of those people are very much in my mind. I can't give you a timescale of how I'm going to do something about it, but we're actively looking at it right now. The Small Producers Pilot Fund isn't for fun. We're not doing that because it was a wheeze. The asks that were previously came to us were about slaughtering from small producers, how to get slaughtered in a facility, which is what was done previously. So this SSI is about making sure that those very professional businesses who do a hell of a lot of good work here in Scotland get the support that I think they need and that they deserve, and that they will continue to be able to produce food. Whether it gets exported down to England or anyplace else, that's a market issue, that's not a one for the government.
You've once again repeated this SSI is about ensuring those producers get the funding. Whether we pass this SSI today makes no difference, they will still get the funding. The issue is how big that budget demand might be based on 50% of producer organisations that may or may not apply to the scheme. So it doesn't affect that unless you decide to bring in a cap.
As Alistair Allen just pointed out, how much money will that take out of the budget if we don't pass this SSI and we do get a large number of POs wanting to join the system in Scotland? We've got no mechanism, because it was reserved by the UK government back down to England so that they would make the decisions about what the criteria was. That would then put an impact on what our overall budget was for the agricultural system.
But that's not what you said just 3 seconds ago. You said if we didn't pass this today, it would effectively put pressure on the production organisations at the moment, producer organisations. Well, that is not the case.
Well, it could very well be the case, because if we suddenly get a huge influx of demands for funding, then it may not put them immediately on them, but I'll tell you, it would certainly sharpen our thinking about whether or not that was something we were prepared to do to keep funding producer organisations that were coming up from England to get that funding.
But you've got no indication of how many might join or whatever, so it's just speculation.
And right now, I'm not prepared to take that risk.
Sorry, Ariane, I interrupted you. Did you have any further points?
I did have a point, but it's gone out of my head now, so it's fine.
Okay. Thank you. We'll now move on to the formal consideration of the motion to approve the instrument, and invite the Minister to speak to and move motion S6M-19989.
Moved.
Does any member wish to debate the motion?
I feel I've got a hand tied behind my back here, so I want to put on record I'm going to vote no to this here, although I recognise I'm actually probably going to have to change my mind and vote yes in committee. But I will want to speak to this in committee because I've got serious concerns over what we've heard this morning. But I just want that to be on record of why I'm doing that, because I think we've got a whole load of answers that I've now got to go away and find that will give me confidence before I think I could vote for this in chamber, presumably after Christmas.
Thank you. Ariane Burgess.
I think I concur with Tim Eagle's points. I'm going to vote no in this case and try to bottom out more information and understanding. But I think also between now and the SSI coming to Chamber, I would like to get some assurances from the Minister on some action that we're going to see that supports other people. And we're saying small producers, but in this context, it's the vegetable and fruit producers. And I want to say that they're all professional and they're all very capable of producing food.
Point.
Yeah.
Any other members? Is the committee content to recommend approval of this instrument? Yes. We are not content. Okay. We are not content. There will be a division. I should know this off by heart, Emma. Those in favour of the motion, please raise your hand now. Those opposed? And the vote is 4 in favour, 5 against. The motion is therefore disagreed. Thank you. So finally, is the committee content to delegate authority to me to sign off our report on this instrument? Thank you. Now that completes our consideration of the instrument and that concludes our business in public for 2025. I wish everybody a Merry Christmas and I now suspend the meeting for 5 minutes to allow us to go into private session. I suspend the meeting.